Mhm. Why, hello, beautiful people, and welcome to this week's installment of Coffee Chats. I have the privilege of being one of the hosts today. Mackenzie, the wonderful Mackenzie Finkley, is feeling a little bit under the weather today, so she won't be joining us, but she is definitely with us in spirit. And so this week on the Coffee Chat, we're going to be talking a little bit more explicitly about what it means to navigate the social media space as authors. I mean, social media in and of itself is like, what? It's such a nebulous area of life, I suppose. But in being authors, we have to really own our author identities and position ourselves differently in the social media space. What does it mean to interact with other authors? What does it mean to interact with readers, our target audiences? So I'm really, really excited to talk about this more explicitly with some of my most I enjoy a lot of my colleagues, but these two I learned so much from, especially when it comes to social media. So, without further ado, allow me to bring in our panelists for today. Hello, panelists. Would
Hello.
you two like to introduce yourselves?
Sure, I'll go first. I'm Riley Vore, and I'm the author of All My Love from the Trenches, and I'm also a author coach at New Degree Press.
Hello, Riley.
And I am Emily Vanderbent. I am the author of a young adult historical fantasy series called the Crimson Time series, and I am also an author coach with New Degree Press.
Yeah, so as you can tell, even though I mentioned it, these two are like some pretty awesome colleagues. So yeah, we get to talk about social media for you guys. We also, on the back end, talk about social media amongst ourselves all the time. So
Yeah.
stay tuned for some really interesting content coming from all of us. So to sort of kick things off with the first question of this evening, afternoon, unclear. I'm not sure what time it is anymore. So how early in the writing and or marketing processes should authors begin to think about their author social media presence? And as sort of an add-on to this, is it that different from the social media presence that they might have as individuals?
I kind of function with the mindset that it's never too early, but it could be too late. So I don't really think it's ever too early to start working on your author social media presence. I mean, we preach all the time, if you write, you're a writer. So you can create that social media presence as a writer until you officially get to use the word author. I just think it's a great idea to start as early as you can, because getting to cue people into the process is super fun, and people want to know about the process way more than you think they would want to know about anything. Because I think you assume that they're more interested in the finished product, but they kind of also want to know the process of how you got there. So I would say it's never too early, but it could definitely be too late.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I usually tell people when I'm working with them as soon as possible. It's honestly never too early to start establishing yourself as an author on social media, but really that mindset has to kind of start with you. I think a lot of writers are kind of hesitant to start up their social media presence because to them they aren't published yet. So with that means that they're not actually an author. But I would say, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, that you're an author the moment that you set pen to paper or fingers to keyboard, depending on how you write. So you have to sort of make that mental switch from a writer to an author in yourself first. Right. And social media too, especially nowadays, is one of the biggest ways that books are bought and sold, if not the biggest way that books are bought and sold. So if you don't have some sort of author presence on social media, you're missing out on a huge pool of potential readers that you could be interacting with and have your book out in front of.
So, I mean, just as a quick add-on question to this, and this is kind of a precursor to a question we'll be talking about a little bit later, but especially for people who are just starting out in their writing processes, like what kinds of content recommendation would you have for them as opposed to people who are actively marketing a book they've already completed?
I mean, I would say that marketing from the beginning, like pushing content is just as important there as when you're marketing a finished product, because I mean, while you are marketing a finished product, there's also a brand that you kind of establish once you start interacting with social media. And I know the word brand is like a real big keyword in the world of social media, but it's really true, and it's not as scary as people assume that it is, because I feel like a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, what's my brand? What is that? That it feels like a really big word. But it's really not. It's really centered around like the content that you want to put out. It doesn't have to be a big scary subject. And so really the building of your brand up until that finished product, I would say, is just as important as when you're marketing the end. So really any kind of content that you can put out throughout the process, I would just push it. I mean, people want to know that, revisions suck sometimes, and people want to know that, you're struggling with writer's block, or, people want to know those things, and it might not seem like they do, but they do. They want to see like the good, the bad, and the ugly of the process. So I would say any content that you can pump out, like, do it. I mean, it's frightening, honestly, it really is, but people want to see it and they'll react to it.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of always err on the side of just share your author journey. It doesn't matter if you have no books written, if you have 25 books written, because of social media and kind of the access that people have these days to celebrities, to authors, to writers, musicians, you fill in the blank. People have started to care a lot more about the person behind whatever that product or that book or that movie is, rather than just the book or the product itself. So anything that you can do to kind of like peel that curtain and like show the Wizard of Oz behind the scenes is what you want to do. You want to kind of invite people in this journey with you.
Yeah, just to quickly piggyback off of what you both have been saying, but to use the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain thing, I just, people really enjoy seeing that authors or any sort of creators are actually human beings and not just perfect entities of knowledge and just swirling in storytelling enthusiasm. Like, being cognizant that like you can relate to the source of a story, like connecting on shared humanity is huge. So yeah, I really gleaned a lot from what you both just shared. But speaking about social media, the thing that I find so fascinating about it is that social media has multiple iterations. Like, we say social media like it's like some conglomerate thing, but increasingly, as we've seen like across different generational breakdowns and things like that, different social media platforms resonate with different audiences. And so, do you two have a favorite social media platform to use? And if so, how do you engage on said platform? And as a baby question, I know I put a whole bunch of questions in a row, but do you think that there are social media platforms that are very like specifically helpful to authors?
Let me see if I can answer all those in one fell swoop. I definitely prefer Instagram. Instagram for me has probably been the most beneficial personally for me. And I mean, I basically I try to put out content that's like real, and also just like, honestly, I'm all for a laugh. If I can make a funny reel and have someone laugh about it with me, I'm for it. So I mean, honestly, I love Instagram. It feels more personal to me than other social media platforms. I don't really know why. There's really not a good reason why I feel that way. But if I had to pick a close second, that would be Twitter. I have not broken into the TikTok world yet. Mm-hmm. I'm a little frightened of the TikTok world, if I'm completely honest.
Me too.
So that being said, that is my Instagram tends to be my favorite.
Yeah, Instagram is definitely my favorite as well. I currently write young adult historical fantasy, so part of that is just largely that my audience is on that platform, in addition to TikTok. But again, I haven't broken into that realm yet either. but I also just I like the variety of content that you can post on Instagram compared to a lot of other platforms. Visually, you can do graphics, you can do static photos, you can do reels, you can do shorter videos, you can do live streams, you can do Instagram TV if it's like a longer type video that you're doing. You can write short copy, you can write long copy. There's a world of possibilities that you don't really see on a lot of other platforms. And at least for me, I feel like being able to kind of mix and match those different types of content helps kind of keep my presence from going stale. And also, like, me as the author, it keeps me engaged because I'm also able to like creatively express myself in all of these different ways. And I'm not just like stuck to one specific thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Full disclosure though, I technically took the TikTok plunge. Technically. I still treat TikTok as like the backup place for where my Instagram reels go. Like, I already made it, so I might as well just put it on TikTok too.
Yeah.
But the incredible Mackenzie Finkley, she has a very burgeoning presence on TikTok. And for our audience members who want to peruse the Coffee Chat, playlist, we do have an episode about book talk specifically with Aparna Verma, who has gone book talk viral. So I think, as a follow-up question to the both of you, you both shared that you enjoyed Instagram in particular because of the diversity of content that you could post on there, but also it seems like that is where your audience most dwells. So do you guys associate different social media platforms with certain audiences?
Oh yeah. I mean, Facebook is like the social media for our parents. And and Instagram feels a little more multi-generational, but I feel like mostly our age. Twitter feels a little younger. So I mean, yeah, I would definitely say there's like age ranges for different social medias, but I mean, truthfully, that's super helpful. That's super helpful for authors who like don't really know where to market their book. I think it's definitely super helpful to know that there are general age ranges. I mean, that doesn't mean to say that you can't sell a book to like a 20-year-old on Facebook, but it is also helpful to know that there's kind of a demographic for each social media.
Yeah, every form of social media sort of has its own vibe. Yeah, Instagram is a little more interactive. It's a little less formal. LinkedIn tends to be a little bit more professional. Generally, you'll see a lot more like nonfiction authors, but really, I would say it's more about the book itself and the kind of content you want to create rather than the genre that you're writing in. You could be writing a nonfiction book, but if you want more of that loose, informal, interactive, informative atmosphere, then maybe you do want to lean into Instagram a little bit more than LinkedIn, or TikTok or whatever it is. It's a lot of like trial and error and just trying to figure out where your audience is and like what they best respond to.
Those are really valid points. I have two they're relevant anecdotes, but they're about like audiences. So first of all, because I have younger siblings, for context, I have 3 younger siblings, but the 2 that are on social media, one of them just turned 21 and the other one is 14. And they had TikTok well before I did. They showed me this TikTok where it was like the older generation of TikTok people, like the ones born in the late 90s. And I said, the disrespect. Like, I'm old. Like, when did this happen?
We're old.
So, yeah.
We crossed
So there
the
we
line.
go.
We're old for TikTok, at least.
We're old for TikTok. But then, as another aside, it's interesting now how Facebook sort of evolved to being the social media platform mostly for our parents, because in high school / middle school, Facebook was apparently the place to be as a young person.
Yeah.
So this just sort of goes to show that these dynamics of audience concentrations is something that is ever evolving. Like, it's important to know who is where, but don't just have fixed assumptions of who is where from like 5 years ago. Like people move, people float. And I think that's important for us as authors to know, as you guys have already pointed to. So for our next question, so you guys mentioned that you particularly enjoy seeing the diversity of content on Instagram, right? And this is true probably for the content you see in a variety of different platforms. How do you generate ideas for your own content? Do you pull inspiration from other posts that you see, or is it more derived from what you feel will best showcase the work that you currently have, or a combination of both?
I feel like it's definitely a combination. There are people way smarter than me on Instagram and social media that know the right thing to do to get a video or a post seen. So like use your resources. There are people on every social media platform that know how to make a post seen. So that doesn't mean that you have to like copy them, but like notice what they're doing. um and yeah, I think generating ideas for content is super intimidating for a lot of people, myself included, because sometimes, you're just sitting there and you're thinking, I have not posted for maybe like 3 to 5 days, and I probably should, but I have no idea what to post. And, that's where you go on your explore page, or you look at the reels, or you go on Pinterest to try to get inspired by something on there. I mean, there are ways to get inspired when you are very, very uninspired. But I would say that when you're uninspired, don't just post nothing because you don't feel like you have anything to share. I would say find something that you are excited about sharing, because odds are there's something. There's something you want to share if you feel like you haven't posted in a while. So find some inspiration. It's out there.
Yeah, this is a really great question because exactly like Riley just said, I feel like the content creation part of social media is what stresses everybody out. We are authors, we are writers, we sit there behind our screens, but it's like, okay, now I have to actually like market my book and have a social media presence. And what the heck do I even create and put on those platforms? But what really helps me, exactly like she said too, is don't be afraid to look at other profiles, see what other people are doing. At least for me, most of the time when I'm looking for content ideas, I'll go to other author profiles specifically and see what they're doing, whether they're traditionally published or indie published or hybrid or what else. Usually that will generate some really great ideas. Don't directly copy what they're doing. Like anything else, you want to steal like an artist. You want to see what they're doing, what their audience is responding to. I would say too, especially when you're looking at authors, look at authors' profiles who write in the same or similar genre to you, because I'm going to post about historical fantasy a little bit different than Riley's going to post about historical fiction. So make sure you're kind of looking at like the nuances and the things that make your individual genre special and would like connect with your audience. The fun thing about ideas though is they can really come from anywhere. They don't have to just be from author accounts. One of like my favorite kind of random idea moments of content kind of came from me just like scrolling through my own feed. I wasn't actively looking, but I had scrolled past a random like Enneagram account that I follow, and they had posted like color palettes for each number in the Enneagram scale. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a fun idea. And it was also kind of around the time where like those Pantone like color palettes were just everywhere on social media. So I was like, how could I take that is kind of like a fad, kind of trending right now, and like relate it to me, to my profile, to my books. And so what I ended up doing is I made color palettes for all of my characters. So it's all made up of colors that corresponds to them. And then all of like the names of the colors are different aspects of their character, different things that they like, stuff like that. But those were really fun and just kind of like a little random thing that you never know where your ideas are going to come from.
Yeah, big brain energy right there. I thought that concept was really cool when I saw it on your feed. Um, so actually, I kind of want to pull this question in from the comments now. Do. So the incredible Mackenzie Finkley just asked, what do you think are key strategic differences in marketing for nonfiction versus fiction on social media, which kind of piggybacks or carries over from what you guys were talking about in generating for content ideas?
Yeah, I think a lot of strategic differences in marketing nonfiction versus fiction I think when you're marketing anything, it always breaks down to your audience. So who you're trying to reach and who you're trying to get to respond. Because a lot of social media marketing is great, but you also want engagement with whatever you are putting out. So if you're gonna post like for a nonfiction book, maybe your probably first instinct is not to go to TikTok. That's probably not going to be the first place you jump to. Not saying you can't do it, but if you're going to, like, for instance, if you're going to try to market a nonfiction book on leadership, for instance, LinkedIn would be a wonderful tool to try to market that book. Any workplace ever has a leader or has people that enjoy leadership or have people that want to be better at that. So you're going to go to a platform that's going to best serve you. So I think at the end of the day, when you're thinking of your book, you have to think of the audience you're trying to reach and where you're going to get the most engagement. So I think once you think about that, the pieces kind of fall into place, because I think noticing the key differences between social medias are getting a little more stark. They're getting a little easier to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree. Aside from kind of just like the difference in the social media platforms themselves, I would also say kind of like the tone that you're looking to develop for your social media presence. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, every single platform has its own vibe. Again, fiction authors are going to tend to excel more on those platforms that have that as atmosphere of like informality. Nonfiction are going to thrive a little bit better on like a LinkedIn or a Facebook. But really, again, too, it is more of like a book by book basis than genre by genre basis. You're going to have to play a little around a little bit and try to figure out where your audience is. It takes a lot of time, intentionality, work, trying to figure that out. You might think your audience is on one platform, but as you begin to figure out like what types of posts you like to post and what types of posts your audience respond to, and kind of like tread that line, you might find that your audience is somewhere you didn't expect. So that is going to be the platform that you're going to want to lean into a little bit more heavily than something else.
And I couldn't agree more. I concur with all aforementioned statements you both just shared. But it's interesting because Mackenzie and I had a conversation about this fairly recently. And it seems like oftentimes nonfiction authors tend to position their books more as products, whereas fiction authors tend to position their books more as art. And is there an overlap between how you market a product or a service you provide versus how you market the opening of an art exhibit? Yes, there's overlap, but the messaging is different. Like the actual language used is different. You know? So yeah, I do think that audience component is huge. You got to know where they live. You got to know what kinds of language they're used to seeing and that they resonate with within the space that they're dwelling in. Because I'm sure there are lots of business executives that would love to read a romance novel, but just not in their capacity as business executives, unless work romance, which
Yeah.
So
It's interesting too that like product versus art mindset.
That feels very like left brain, right brain to me. I don't know why that's where my mind went, but that's kind of where that led me.
Which makes sense too, because I feel like a lot of the time fiction authors are more in the mindset of wanting to make a career out of their writing. They're wanting to write more than that one book and hopefully let it go somewhere. Whereas I feel like a lot of nonfiction authors kind of want that like one and done to propel their career forward rather than like make that a career in and of itself.
Right. That's a key distinction. It's like a Venn diagram, you know? It's just how much of it does it overlap? I don't know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in moving to our next question here, so we've been talking about audience for basically all of our call because it's about a huge part of the reason why we have social media to begin with is to engage with our audience. Of course, like it's a place of self-expression for us, but we're expressing ourselves in front of people, right? So, I mean, how do you go about growing your audience on social media? Because it's one thing to express yourself and like hope that people resonate with what you're doing, but it's another thing to like be very intentional about growing your targeted audience. Like, is it targeted periods of marketing, or is it something that just gradually happens over time as you produce more and more content?
I think it's both. I think that there is just some gradual growth that happens as you market and as you put out content, but at the same time, you can't always expect people to engage with you if you do not engage with others. So like if you're just putting out content, but you're not following new accounts or you're not interacting with, Bookstagrammers, or if you are not commenting on people's posts or sharing people's posts or, entering giveaways, or if you are not engaging with other accounts, it's not super likely that people are going to engage with you. Because also, it's a big circle, because truthfully, you could comment on someone else's post and someone could find you and say, oh my gosh, your book sounds amazing. And it could all be a big circle. Like it's a big cycle. So I feel like a lot of it too is that it does gradually happen as you put out content, but there is also some targeted periods where you're going to also have to engage in order to kind of grow your audience as well.
Yeah, I would agree. It's definitely a balance. And I want to kind of like make the distinction too that it's not really a numbers game. Yes, followers are important, but it's more a matter of who's engaging on that content that you create. At least for me, and kind of like in my navigating of social media, where I've kind of seen the most growth happen, both in the engagement and the followers, is when I've done collaborations with other accounts. These collaborations can really be anything, depending on what you're looking for. I've done everything from like book tours to merch collabs to author talkbacks and book reviews. There's really like no limit to what you could do with these things, but they're a really great way to like get your name and your face out there, but B, like succeed in tangent with someone else rather than alone.
I think that the community aspect of it is really important. I guess my follow-up question for both of you would be, so if there are periods, so again, it isn't a numbers game. I completely concur with that. But are there particular points in your book journey where you should be extra intentional about audience expansion? Like gearing right up to publish day, like anniversary times? Like, are there, even in your own book journeys, were there times when you told yourself, my main focus is growing my audience?
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I mean, I think you definitely like hit it on the head. It's definitely around, publishing time. It's maybe that month up to publishing, and, maybe a month after. Those times are pretty crucial. And then, anniversaries, if you start hitting that year after a book, you really want to amp that up, because I mean, it's exciting. You have had a book out in the world for a year. That's pretty sick. So, I mean, I feel like there are moments where you have to really thrive off the excitement that you want other people to have. Like if you are excited, people will be excited. So, yeah. So I mean, just be excited, because those exciting times will help you and they will gear you towards growing an audience.
Yeah, I would agree. I definitely go a little bit heavier into marketing. I would even say like 3 months out from the publication, just to like continue to like drive that momentum and stir the excitement, and leak certain things and share behind the scenes stuff. And then once you publish, like that's not the end all be all. Like there's still work to do going off of that. You still have to get the word out about your book, and you still have to interact with people and get reviews and try to get in book boxes and so many other things that kind of like domino off of that. So you want to kind of keep that momentum going the best that you can. Really, like your book is still considered new, like up to 2 years after publication. So you still have technically all of that time. You'll probably still be working on other books and additional things and whatnot, but you still technically have all that time to kind of like continue the marketing for that individual book. So you're going to have kind of those periods where you're going to lean into it a little bit heavier, but every so often try to work it into your schedule, whether it's like maybe 3 times a week you take 1 hour a day to like specifically sit down and do marketing. But it's definitely something that you got to work into your schedule, because it's very important. Because if you don't create that content, if you don't do that outreach, people don't know about you. They don't know about your book.
Yes, exactly. So, as we transition into our second to last question, I'm going to make sure that everybody in the audience knows that, this is live. So, if you have questions, drop them inside of the chat and we will do our best to address them. And of course, if you are not watching this live, you could drop your questions inside of the comment section below, and somebody within the Manuscripts team will address your concern. Because social media in particular is a very dynamic topic. So there are all kinds of things to talk about. So yeah, behold the ticker at the bottom as a reminder to ask a question. So for the second to last formal question, because I do have a couple of follow-ups if nobody else does. What is one piece of advice you would give to other authors developing their social media identities? And kind of as a dovetail to that, are social media identities distinct from other identities? Or should they be similar?
I would say yes. I would say that there are things that you would put on maybe like a personal account that you maybe wouldn't put on an author account, or vice versa. Like there are different, just like, there's different sides of you when you're like in different arenas for whatever reason. Like you're probably not going to act the same way at home. Like you don't dress the same way at home that you dress at work. Like you're probably not going to show up to work in sweatpants. So it's kind of like, if you don't want to like share a ton of your like private life, like maybe that would go on your author account. Like, but also there are some things on your author account that if people don't follow you on that account, they might want to know. So a great way to kind of like overlap is to share stuff on your author account, on your private account as well, because there are some people that maybe didn't want to follow you throughout the whole process, but now that your book's out in the world, they're super excited for you and they want to know. So I feel like that's kind of a balance as well, like kind of having that social media identity and knowing what to share and what not to share. And that's totally up to you. There's really like no standard on that. That's really up to you. Some authors want to share like every bit of their life, and I know some that are very private, outside of what they market, and that's like totally fine. That's whatever you want to share. But I would say that my one piece of advice would just to be very authentic. We all know that social media is a highlight reel of life. We all know that. But also like don't be scared to show like the really crappy parts of the journey, because being an author can come with loneliness, imposter syndrome, self-doubt, writer's block. Like really, there are some really crappy parts of this journey, but that along with the like amazing experience that it is. So like I would say don't be afraid to be authentic about the parts that are hard. Because you don't want the authentic and amazing journey to be a highlight reel. Make that the whole story, not the highlight reel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was good. I agree.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, that was perfectly said. I guess to kind of add on to that like same thread, I would say have fun with your social media account and your social media presence. If you're not having fun, your audience is going to be able to tell, and they're not going to be having fun. Really don't be afraid to like play around and figure out what kind of content you like to produce, what kind of content that like they respond to. Like I said earlier, it's a lot of trial and error. Don't be afraid to fail. You will. You're going to have that one reel that you spent 2 hours on, that you posted and you thought it was the perfect time, but you get 100 views. And then you're going to have that one reel that you randomly throw up on a Saturday at 4:00 that you spent 2 minutes on, and you're going to get like 5,000. Not that I'm speaking from personal experience or anything.
Yeah, we both have great stories about that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's your social media presence. You want it to be you want it to reflect you, but also because of that access that people have to you now, like don't feel like you have to share everything. Be authentic, be vulnerable, be personable. But people don't necessarily have the privilege of knowing every single little facet of you, and that's okay. Share what you want to share, lean into the fun stuff, lean into the not so fun stuff. But don't be afraid to kind of also reserve some pieces for yourself as well, because you are more than just like the platform that you create and that presence that you create. Just because people know you on that platform itself does not mean that they truly know you. Reserve some time and space and energy for yourself too.
Beautifully said, both of you. Ugh, just learned so much just then. Anyway, I don't see any questions in the chat at the moment, but remember when I said I had a couple of follow-up questions? I want a visual. Well, here they are. So the first follow-up question that I have for you guys, I'm just going to leave the banner at the bottom in the event somebody wants to drop something in. But my first question for you guys is, are you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier on in your answers kind of just now, but there seems to, debate is not the right word, and we talk about this a bit within the context of broader workshops in the work that we all do with authors, but some authors make the decision as to whether or not they want to create an author account that's completely separate from their personal account, or if they just incorporate all of their author news into their personal account. So I, for example, honestly, I didn't really have a social media presence before becoming an author. So I just converted my personal account into my author account. From what I understand, you both have decided to have author accounts and personal accounts. So how would you advise authors in making decisions like that?
I feel like it really depends on the individual. I feel like it does. Like if you don't have a huge social media presence, then like converting might not be a hard switch or anything like that. I was on social media pretty regularly for lots of different things, and so like converting my account seemed like a bigger hassle than like just making a whole different thing. And also like personally, I was just of the mindset that, you know, maybe not everyone on my personal accounts wants to be part of my author journey, and that's okay. So for that reason, I made a separate account thinking that, you know, I would hope that lots of people from my personal accounts would want to follow my author accounts, and they do. But there are some that don't, and that's fine. So I also kind of made it for that reason. Like I didn't want to bombard people in my personal life with book stuff if that wasn't really the content they wanted from me. If they just wanted to like, you know, see how my life was going and all that stuff, then that's what my personal accounts are for. But for people that wanted access to all my book stuff, that's kind of why I made that.
Yeah, my kind of thought process was very similar. I wasn't super active on social media before I like started pursuing actually being an author. But I did have various different profiles on the different sites. For me, I wanted to still maintain that, I guess, like private space where it's my close friends, it's my family, it's the people who want those like life updates and those things that I wouldn't necessarily post on like an author profile. And I wanted to kind of start from scratch over on the author sense, where I'm like purposefully, like, this is going to sound weird, but where I'm like purposefully like curating a presence. I'm curating like a brand for me in my books and my goals. So I kind of wanted to keep those two spheres separate, but again, it's kind of up to you and what feels most natural for what you want to do. But yeah, I ended up kind of keeping them separate. I will have kind of that overlap occasionally, like Riley said too, where some of those like those bigger steps within the author journey where like a book publishes, or you're going to like a book signing, or like an event or something, like some of those things I'll post on like a personal too, because that's still something exciting that like people following my personal account would want to see. But like people following my personal account might not necessarily want to see like a picture that I mocked up on Artbreeder of one of my characters. So just kind of like know your audience and know like what you're trying to do with your social media presence.
Speaking of knowing what you're trying to do in your social media presence, this is my last question, I promise. Okay, so a lot of the authors within the broader context of the New Degree Press program right now are going through revisions. And I don't know if y'all remember, I'm sure you do, but revisions is very much a vortex. So how do you recommend authors maintain a social media presence during revisions? Like how should they manage their social media expectations during that time?
Well, Emily and I have very different views on revisions. I love revisions. If I could spend my entire life doing revisions, that would be great. If someone could like write my first draft for me from my mind, and then I could just do the revisions on it, like that'd be great for me. So I feel like I'm kind of the minority in that situation. But honestly, I feel like it goes back to being authentic. Like for a lot, and that's not to say I love revisions all the time. Because there were some weeks where I was like, I have to revise like 7 chapters this week, and I have to write a new one because the old one didn't work. And I would post a reel and I'd be like, guys, I'm freaking tired. Like I feel like a lot of it just goes back to being authentic, and you don't have to post all the time. You've got stuff to do when you're doing revisions. But also like the revisions process is something that I think a lot of people don't think about when they're writing a book. I mean, I think a lot of people assume that if you are an author, if you are a writer, if you're a creative in that way, that your first draft must be the finished product. Like the first thing you pump out has to be pristine. Like it just has to be, because you're a creative and that's how your mind works. And so I feel like to let people in on the revisions process a little bit and be like, guys, this sucks. This is hard. I hate this. Because sometimes that's just real. That's how you feel throughout the process. I feel like that's all part of it. And people do want to see that. And they're like, oh my gosh, you have to go through how many rounds of edits? A lot. The answer is a lot. And yeah, so I feel like letting people in on that is like, that's like fun. That's part of the journey, and that's part of what they want to see. That's part of why they follow you. So you don't have to post every day. You've got stuff to do. But also don't hide the fact that revisions are hard, and don't hide the fact that, your first draft is not perfect. Don't let anyone assume that first drafts are perfect, because they're so not. I can speak from experience. I'm writing a first draft right now. But yeah, I mean, share it. share what you want to. I mean, again, don't post all the time if you don't want to, but yeah, share it. It sucks and it's fine and people want to know.
Yeah. For the sake of saying something different, because that was lovely. Yeah, exactly what I was thinking too, but that's okay. I would say too, like, whether you're a planner or not to begin with, be organized and stay organized, particularly during the revisions process. If you need to, and like, again, all of our advice is on like a person by person basis. So if you try it and you don't like it, find what works for you. But how I'll go about doing that, especially when I get closer to revisions, is I plan out my social media content by month. So at the end of every month, I'll sit down and figure out what that looks like for the coming month. I know other authors that will do it by week. So they'll sit down every Saturday or every Sunday and plan it out for the week. But if you can plan that out, and if you can even go so far, maybe like for 3 hours on a Sunday or Saturday when you have some extra time in all of our free time, sit down and like, don't just plan it, but like generate that content. So maybe it's making those 10 reels, or going on Canva and designing those couple graphics, or taking those couple like Bookstagram aesthetic pictures, whatever that looks like plan the content, generate the content in bulk. You can even use a scheduler too. That also takes some of like the pressure off. So if you can get that all created and they're up front, and then even just like schedule it on a scheduler, it'll kick it out for you. And that makes sure that you're still posting, you're still prepped, you still are like purposefully getting content out there. But it also saves you time kind of on that back end. So when I'm drafting, I'll do a lot of that like generating of content. So then when I get into the revision stage, I can kind of just roll it out on a regular basis. Usually too, I'll kind of cut down a little bit on the amount of times that I post. So whereas normally maybe I post like 5-6 times a week, I'll go down to like 3 to 4 as well, depending on how much content I was actually like able to generate beforehand.
Yeah, Emily is probably the person who inspired me most to think about content scheduling. So thank you for that, Emily. I don't know if I ever told you that.
You're welcome.
So as I don't see any questions in chat, this is the last question. Any final words of wisdom you want to share with our audience today?
I would say don't be afraid of social media. It's a tool to help you when you're marketing. It is not the only way that you market, but like it's a tool that helps you. Don't look at it as something that's like frightening and is going to like hurt you. It's something that will help you throughout the process. So like use it as a tool and don't be frightened of it. It's not scary, and you'll meet some awesome people through it. Mm-hmm. Emily and I and Kyra and I too, we have met. I know we've all met some awesome author friends and non-author friends and all kinds of different things through social media, through marketing, through all kind of struggling in solidarity. So yeah, I mean, don't be scared of it. It's, we do it because we market and we live in 2022. and that's how marketing takes place. So like, don't be scared of it. It's fine. We all struggle. It's okay.
Yeah. To kind of add to that, I would say too, like, don't be afraid to ask questions. I've kind of been trying to live by the answer is always no if you don't ask. At least if you make that ask, the answer could be yes. So whether that's like, maybe it's a technical thing with how to create reels. Maybe you're like, I have no idea where to even start. Do some Googling or find an account on TikTok or Instagram that makes really awesome reels and send them a message. Reach out, connect, collaborate too with the author collaborations. Maybe you want to do a talk back with someone, or maybe you want to get featured in a book box or have author merch made. Like, find the people who have done it before and don't be afraid to ask them how they did what they did. Because I guarantee you that they got where they are now by being where you were asking questions originally. So ask those questions and don't be afraid of them.
And Emily is the queen of bookish merch. So ask Emily.
I do love bookish merch. I think all of our handles should be down in the description. So definitely feel free to follow any of us. And again, I mean, I just said it, so I opened the door for it. But yeah, feel free. Ask questions.
We'll give you our best answer.
Yes.
Yes. We will not steer you wrong.
Yes.
But if we don't know something, we'll tell you that too. Because again, we don't want to steer you wrong.
None of us are at social media.
Yeah. I think that's the fun of being an author on social media is, I will say especially like Instagram again, because that's where I am mostly. But like on that platform, yes, we're all authors and writers, but like we're still all learning. Whether we have 0 books out or 25 books out, like we will all still admit to you that it's a growing and a learning process and we don't know it all.
And it's super fun to root for other authors on social media. Like, guys, that's so fun. When Emily sold a book for me the other day. So I had to FaceTime her because I was like, you just sell me a book? Because she was commenting on stuff. So, I mean, like, it's super fun to root for each other. It's super fun to just do that. So, like, don't be afraid to meet people and don't be afraid to just go for it.
So beautifully said. And also, based off of something that you just said, Riley, I just realized that this is the first coffee chat of 2022.
Wow.
What? Holy smokes. So this is a little belated, but Happy New Year, beautiful people.
Happy New Year.
Yeah. Just we have a whole exciting realm of coffee chats and other content ahead. So I want to thank you both so much for being here with us and just for being awesome colleagues in general. I hope that one day I can actually meet you both in like a real live coffee shop. That would be a vibe.
I agree.
That would be awesome.
Mm-hmm. Well, everyone, basically, that's all we have for today. I just made a VeggieTales reference by accident, and I'm not sorry for it. But basically, for our next coffee chat, we're going to talk all things book awards. So stay tuned for that. And I look forward to seeing all of you soon. Tune back here live. And also just stay posted on a lot of the content we're generating here over at Manuscripts. We're really going to up the ante in 2022 and give all the educational, writerly insights that we'd love to share with you all. So stay blessed and have a good one.